Hello, welcome to Beyond Averages, our weekly data podcast where we try to bring the story behind the big numbers. In today's show, we'll be talking about Trump's tariffs. Last week, US President announced an additional 25% levy on Indian goods, citing New Delhi's links with Russia. While the measure is expected to hit about 55% of India's exports, the heaviest blow will likely fall on the MSME sector, especially gems and jewelry, textiles, and apparel. The move raises pressing questions. Can India's small and medium enterprises weather the tariff shock? And are there viable opportunities to redirect trade to alternative markets? We have today with us Aditya Kumar Sharma, Assistant Professor, Delhi University, and Saurabh Agarwal, Tax Partner, EY India, to discuss more about this issue. Thanks for coming on the show, both of you. Now, one of the aspects here that is primary to this is that Indian MSMEs account for a large portion of employment both in textile and gems and jewelry sector. If you look at RBI's CLEMS database or the annual survey of unorganized sector enterprises, textile sector accounted for about 15 million employment, while the gems and jewelry sector had about 4 billion. Now, what are we discussing here? If you are looking at government numbers, then that employment is about 45 million for the textile and related industries. And this is all direct employment. There are indirect employment as well. But before we go to our experts, let me take you through a few charts that I have. Now, effective tariff rates in India before Trump's announcement were much lower than our Southeast Asian or South Asian partners. But if you look now, India's effective tariffs rate, including the MFN that was charged earlier, is now 31%, which is higher than Bangladesh, higher than Sri Lanka and Pakistan, and almost double that of Vietnam and Philippines, and triple that of Thailand. So that puts us at a disadvantage. Moreover, if you look at it, in about 14 of the top 50 import categories, and these are larger categories defined on 4-digit HS codes, we have higher trade, higher US dependency in these. Look at synthetic stones, 92.4% dependence is there. Look at bedspreads, that's about 40% dependence. Shrimps, we have about 40% again, 60% in linen. Leather sacks, we have about 63% dependence. Blouses, shirts, and other items, we have again about 40%. New pneumatic tires, cement, concrete, all these items have over 20-25% dependence. Moreover, if you look at it, how does it impact certain districts? So we did a district-wise analysis using Ministry of Commerce data, and we found that Patnamthitta in Kerala and Mirzapur in Uttar Pradesh, famous for its TV series as well, are the highest affected sectors. Mirzapur because of its carpet exports, and Patnamthitta because of the turmeric oil exports, which are used in this. Now, let's bring our experts in and try to see what they make of it. Hi, Saurabh, let me come to you first. If you could tell us are we looking at a huge disruption or is this likely to be a smaller impact here? What would be the thing?
So, Ishan, if I have to answer this question broadly, I'll cover it in 4 points. Uh, is it a significant disturbance? As far as MSMEs are concerned, I think the answer is clearly yes. With a 50% tariff, I don't think so that MSMEs can survive. And more so when we look at the neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, the difference between the tariffs is around 30 to 35%, which means that US customer will try and buy from those locations or those countries and move the supply chain over there. MSMEs are the most affected because when we look at whether it is textile apparel, gems, jewelries, leather goods, marine products, I think these were some of the key sectors where our MSMEs were operating. The gems and jewelry sector, which employs around 4.3 million people and exports worth around $10 billion. I think with the festival season coming in, now with the total duty over 52%, this sector is likely to suffer. And I have been seeing the news what is happening in Surat, what is happening in other parts of Gujarat, where there has been employment losses which are already happening. When we look at erosion of competitiveness and margins, we can clearly see that US customers are asking for a demand cuts. They are putting the orders on hold because of these particular tariffs which are being imposed. So immediate consequences, if you look at in a short run, I do foresee that there is significant impact and likely there will be cancellation of order. And from an upcoming festival season perspective, our MSMEs will likely suffer. The overall export growth drop, which I foresee somewhere close to 6% overall, and potentially millions of jobs can be affected in the sectors.
Aditya, let me come to you on this because you have worked in Uttar Pradesh and this area, and your PhD was also related to this, as we were discussing. What would be the impact specifically in the poorer states of the country? Because the richer states like Gujarat and all are suffering and they have their own challenges. What would be the impact there? And from a larger MSME viewpoint, do you just view this as a minor disturbance, or as Saurabh said, it is a larger paramount view that you hold that it's going to affect the sector hugely?
About what we are discussing, I believe what Sorry is saying tends to hold its course. See, when you see MSMEs, the India-US trade relationship has been very good for over a decade, especially in exports. You see incremental growth in export from 2013 coming to 2023. But this tariff with a levi of 25% more, which makes it 50%, this has made the exporters nervous and uncomfortable. Now, that the I like to reiterate the point that Saurabh sir was saying, that there are three major sectors which would be impacted. The one was gems and jewelries, the other is the apparel, and the third one would be the engineering goods, including the auto component and the machinery. If you see, our 85% of our exports from SEPS SEZ were to the United States, and these on a macro level were employing about 50,000 of the students, right? 50,000 of the people. Now, this tariff has taken away the competitive edge of Indian firms in the US market. This, as per I can see it, especially going to states like Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh, if you see the exports from Uttar Pradesh, you will see electronics, you will see apparels, you will see gems and jewelry, and importantly, as you discussed, carpets. Coming to carpets, you will see that there is about $700 million of trade from UP to United States in the carpet industry, which is closely about the 70% of the total trade, and which 50% the carpet industry is fighting the machine based carpet mechanized carpet industry, and then now they're fighting these trade. This would create a very huge disruption, especially in the carpet market. Gems and jewelries is again would have the same fate if these things are not negotiated. For what I believe is that this is not a minor disruption. This has the ability to change the sector, has ability to lead to sectoral disruptions. If not dealt carefully, what I could suggest, according to the trend, there would be a decline in the exports from about 10 to 15%, especially in the high risk categories, which is the gems and jewelries and the apparel sector. So that I think would be the main point.
Uh, Saurabh, we've been talking about FTAs a lot. We just signed one with UK. We are discussing one with EU. We are discussing one with other destinations as well. Would they be able to somehow soften this blow, or are these very established supply chains and moving them is very difficult for especially smaller enterprises like MSMEs and all?
So, Ishan, I'll answer the question in two points specifically. When we look at, I don't think FTA is something which has come all in new. I think it's a UK FTA, Australia FTA, which has come in new. If you look at holistically, FTAs were already there for quite long. We have a FTA with Asian countries, we have a FTA with Japan, we have a FTA with Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam. Many of these countries are already covered in the free trade agreements. If you look at the risk, there has been a very low FTA utilization as far as MSMEs are concerned, primarily because of reasons such as complexity of rules of origin, lack of awareness and information which are being available, capacity and scale issue for these MSMEs, and the fact that when many of these agreements were entered into in the past, the thought process of the government was to provide the cheap product at a right price to the Indian consumers. Now that our manufacturing sector has developed, Now we are looking into fresh FTAs altogether. Now, if you look at from a UK FTA perspective, which is being much talked about, one, I would say that any impact of a FTA will come in a mid run. It will not come in a short run. For a supply chain to change, it is not like a overnight process. And then when we look at these FTAs, there should be dedicated provisions for MSMEs. If we look at from an MSME perspective, the rules of origin, the self-certification should be there, dedicated contact points should be there to help these particular MSMEs. At the same time, creating awareness by the government as far as MSMEs are concerned is very important. So educate them, build capacities around them, and then provide them digital platforms so that these FTAs can enable them to get the best benefits of the export market. But as I said, I'll reiterate, the impact of the same will come in mid-run. On a short-run perspective, if you see, I think the markets will get hit as far as MSMEs are concerned.
Aditya, what's your take on this? Are we looking at a potential disruption or can FTA soften the blow? Also, as Saurabh pointed out, trade utilization in the past agreements, especially Japan, if you look at it, has been quite low. So, what will change now so drastically with UAE or with UK or with Australia? UAE, our trade has increased, of course, but what will change now? And the second question that arises, can they even absorb what the US market is actually leaving? Aditya, to you.
About this, see FTA, when you see this from the small business side, so small business has given always an equal importance, sometimes more importance to non-tariff barriers than the tariff barriers, right? So sometimes you enter into FTA, but the compliance cost is quite high. Then there are administrative lags, then there is custom duty, and all these things make the small business exporters export unviable. They do not want to, and they do not tend to utilize the trade agreement that is there. But it's not that the FTA were not beneficial for us. As you said, there are FTAs. The India UAE FTA has led to increase in the exports of merchandise in the UAE. But the payoff does not just depend on the FTA. It depends on the partners now. How do you work on the ease of doing business, especially for the small sectors and the MSME sectors? More than that, it also depends on the complexities. How do you deal with the complexities of origins of rules of origins? That is one other thing. Trade utilization, as you see, have not been as much in the Indian context as it should have been. Again, the issue lies with the the complexities that are there. If you see these complexities, the rules of origin, and especially the administrative lag, which is there. Plus, there is this issue of uh, delays in the custom delays which are there. So again, these are the same points which are uh, pushing us in the same direction as the de-utilization of FTA, and also impacting the FTAs as which can soften the blow. So FTA cannot directly soften your blow. There need to be other things that have to be come in hand, so the simultaneously could work together to soften this blow, right?
So, sort of coming to you now, we were talking about trade utilization and you mentioned some parts of it, but I'll push you on that question a bit more. Uh, why has the trade utilization been low? Is it just an awareness problem, or did we negotiate bad FTAs in the past where we didn't take care of non-tariff barriers, like we have done more in the UK agreement where we've agreed to certain rules? So, what was the factor there? Is it just a problem of awareness, or is it more?
So, Ishan, the answer cannot be in binary. It's one or zero, which is good or bad. To answer that specific question, we have to see the situation of the Indian economy at that particular juncture. The need of the hour when those agreements with Japan, Korea, Asian were negotiated was to provide the product to the Indian consumer at the right price. Get in the technology. Many of these agreements have led to big auto OEMs setting up their shops in India. They have put in a lot of ancillaries have come because of the same. It has led to localization. It has led to creation of employment in the country. So I don't think so we can say good or bad. It is situational. At that time, it was to develop the economy in the country. Now we are moving to, if we were underdeveloped economy, we are moving to a developing economy and now towards a developed economy. Now the situation has changed. Now we want to provide an export market to our manufacturing. I think we have, during COVID, we have been talking about our strategy for being a manufacturer for the world. From Atmanirbhar Bharat, I many a times now say that we are moving towards Bharat Par Nirbhar. So it's very important to understand that the policies have to be built accordingly. If you see what this government has been doing, there has been, to enhance the resilience and competitiveness of the MSMEs. From protectionism, we need to look at long term growth. The problem which happens is that everyone wants to look at a short term initiatives. Now, if I have to divide this particular thing into short term and long term, I would say in short term, some of the fiscal incentives in the form of extending interest equalization scheme to all US bound exports, giving the ROTTEP and ROSTCL in a time bound manner. Some people in the industry have been asking increase the rate of ROTTEP, increase the rate of ROSTCL. I think even if the government increases it to 5% or 6%, will it help? The answer is no. With a 30 to 35% difference compared to neighboring countries, I don't think so 5 or 6% can help the cause. Financial relief is another area wherein we can look at by way of waiving administrative charges, relaxing collateral norms, providing low-cost export factoring to the MSMEs. These are the things which will help in short term. Diplomatic efforts anyways are being made to get to a conclusive part as far as the US FTA is concerned. But if I look at, I think I personally feel that it will go somewhere in September, October, when we'll be able to reach some bit of conclusion. But when I look at long-term structural reforms, I think that is what is important for the government to look into. And what I will say, if I have to divide it into four baskets, market diversification, which anyways the government is doing, UK, Australia, UAE, Brazil, and other developing economies. We can see Prime Minister visiting many part of the underdeveloped economies, and sometimes I see people laughing that why is he visiting to these countries? I think he's trying to create a market for our Indian manufacturers. Building domestic competitiveness is another important area. Localization is the key to success, and which we are seeing now. The rare earth crisis we have seen. So localization is some area where we need to focus quite a lot, and of course we need to build upon the R&D capacities. Strengthening domestic value chains is another important area, which is linked to localization, if I have to say, and then skill development and e-commerce. I think skilling is very important. We have seen the Gujarat model. Polytechnics have worked. So we need to enlarge our skill development programs, ensure that we are skilling our people. And with AI coming in, very important point, with AI coming in, we keep on saying that there will be lots of jobs. But when computer came in, that was the same issue. But we skilled our manpower. If we do upskilling of our manpower, then we will not have those particular problems.
So, Saurabh, let me counter you with 2 points to what you made. So, is the government program towards these labor-intensive industries and all, what do you think of these within this paradigm that you're talking about, AI and robotics? And two, when you talk about FTAs, you also talk about what happened in India, but I have a corollary to make. During this period, also, we tried to enhance our manufacturing base, but we were outcompeted in every sense. The China plus one strategy, there was a World Bank paper very recently, about a year ago, which talked about how Vietnam and other countries were able to take advantage. Where are we lagging, especially? It's not protectionism, but where is it going from that perspective?
So let me answer your two questions in different manners. First, I'll take your questions around free trade agreements. So when you say, I think we have seen a PLI coming in. Government has put in 3.07 lakh crores in the offering. I think of which till 24-25, I think the refunds which will get reimbursed to the industry will be close to 25 to 26,000 crores. I think the uptake has been slow. The reason being that the majority of these schemes were wanting R&D. Majority of these schemes were wanting technical products which were not being manufactured in the country. So I think it's for the India Inc. also to push themselves to get into those particular technology areas. And I think government is also relooking and will be looking at many of these particular PLI programs to ensure that the localization happens in the country. Now, any of the nitis which are made, the impact of those nitis will be felt over a period of time. The classic example is mobile phone story. While people will say that our exports are declining because of the PLI will fade away over a period of time, but if you see, majority of the mobile OEMs have set up their shops. Just because PLI is over, I don't think so that they will shut their shops and go back to their home countries. I think there will be a development which will happen. I think looking at the neighboring country, I think world was talking about creating alternate supply chains during COVID. And after the tariff war and the global trade tensions, I think it's more and more into the boardrooms that they are considering other countries for this particular aspect. Now, to answer your question on Vietnam, Indonesia, etc., it's very important to understand, and I keep on giving that example to my clients as well. It's very important to understand that Vietnam and Cambodia or maybe Indonesia have a smaller geographical area. Also, the talent which is available compared to the talent which we have, the demographic dividend which we are enjoying as a country, I think we are far ahead than them. I think government is taking small steps. Anyways, India takes smaller steps towards the success. I don't think so we can compare ourselves to China. We are nowhere close to China, and maybe in next 5 years we'll nowhere be close to China because they have developed it over a period of time. So I don't think a comparison with China is the right comparison to be made, or it's like a China plus one strategy. I don't think it is a China plus one strategy. It is how we can work back together with China, because the technology might also come from China itself. So therefore, we need to look into that manner to work as Asian countries together to build alternate supply chains for the world and ensure that the impact of these global trade tensions are lower on us. Now, coming to your second question around AI, etc. I think, I have been telling my team members many a times for last 1 year that AI will be the future. I think it's more about adoption. Now, there will be two manner, and this is purely my personal view. I think the two ways in which we can counter the AI related problem is, one, we upskill ourselves. We learn the prompt engineering better. I use AI in my day-to-day life, and I'm finding it very easy to come to a lot of conclusions basis the same. Of course, it's in the infant stage. You need to apply a lot of your mind to come to a final conclusion, but you do get the data in a time-bound manner. Now, but from an India perspective, when you say India is quite a high population in India, labor-intensive sectors, I think there are a lot of handicrafts which are there, which the Indian government is pushing quite a lot in terms of exporting it to the global markets. I think the art which is sitting in the country will be some which is being, you can say, promoted by MSMEs. I think that area, if we promote it in a right manner, I think globally we can create a mark for the country, and whatever is the, you can say, implication of AI, I think part of it can be absorbed through promoting such arts which are available in the country.
Aditya, would you agree with the point that more GI tags, more streamlining of quality products is the differentiator in it? And what more can the government do? We've heard from Saurabh about what more can be done. And I'll get back to Saurabh in a while about the protectionism argument. But uh, from your perspective, what should be done?
See, during my study, which I particularly did on specifically on the MSMEs of Uttar Pradesh, I found some lags. One of them was managerial and planning practices. So the MSME does not have a proper planning practice. They do not create this concise, precise, smart, measurable plans, business models, sorry. It's not that they do not want to do it, it's that they're not skilled enough to do it. So that one thing I believe, and apart from that, the management practices, especially the human resource management practices, are very much important. Skilling them is very much important. About what you asked earlier, that GI tagging, yes, GI tagging will help create brands, and this is one way we can deter this tariff, because once you create a brand, you can ask buyer to co-share your tariffs, because it has now created the brand. But that's a long-term strategy. It takes a lot of time. As Soros said, the medium-term strategy of diversifying, it is one of the best strategy that we can do, because we are working on trade agreements with BIMSTEC. We are working with Eurasian countries. We have a trade agreement with UK. We have a trade agreement with UAE, which is ongoing. So, in spite of, see, you need to see this question from a short term, long term, and a medium term perspective. The short-term perspective, as Sir said, was again true that you need to interest subsidy needs to be given to the MSMEs, right? They need to be provided this the duties exemptions. Apart from them, in the medium strategy, because the government has allocated somewhere around 20,000 crore rupees for export market diversifying, but then there are problems with the export market diversification, because then the MSME, especially MSME sector, the owners need to relearn the policies, the rules of origin compliances, and other factors, the paperwork. So the training is important. I believe we should train and then implement, right? So otherwise, it would be a part of the MSME sector. If you see the MSME total, the 90% of them goes to the micro enterprises, which are very small. They do not even know how to, read a document properly in sometimes. But most part of it goes to these medium enterprises. Again, one important aspect before making the GI, though GI will make it, we need to make these MSME learn how to acquire customers, right? That's a very important fact. MSME has always been dependent on networks and inter-firm linkages to acquire customers. They have been working in the network system for quite a while now. They have tried to adopt the new digital media marketing strategies, but to some extent, right? But as Sir said, the advent of AI can help them. Now, it has not, digital media marketing has not become a has now is now not a very difficult thing. It can be done through AI, as through the prompt engineering, and you can make banners, you can create posters, you can make websites. So AI is the way, right? AI is the way. Before branding, we need to move them in a position that they can use that particular kind of branding. So that will come through managerial practices, that will come through technology upgradation, that will come through financial management, and then eventually we will move them to diversification, and then we can move to GI. That is what I would understand from my study.
Saurabh, coming to you, you were talking about the protectionism part of it. Won't any of these initiatives that the government is talking about, the CGT, MSME expansion, the interest rate guarantees, and everything, won't this be called protectionism in the view of saving our MSMEs from a export route? Or do you, and I understand these are short-term measures, but what is the long-term goal there? Because ultimately, then those protectionism measures tend to continue for a long period of time.
So, Ishan, it's a complex issue as far as protectionism is concerned. There are potential benefits and there are significant drawbacks as well. Now, if you look at Indian government, I don't think so. As a country, we have ever followed a protectionism approach. I think what is happening across the globe, due to which we are forced to go into a protectionism route. When US is putting a Inflation Reduction Act IRA and trying to protect their industry, and of course by saying that these are industries of national importance, etc., I think as a country we also need to protect our industry. And to that extent, certain measures which are being taken by the government in the form of non-tariff measures like quality control orders, port orders, minimum import price, I think these are measures which have to be taken over a period of time. From an MSME perspective, giving them interest subsidies, giving them interest equalization, etc. These are short-term measures which have to be rolled out in order to protect the industry. Now, there has to be a balance which has to be made, that how we need to roll these initiatives or incentives back as the market settles, because these are tensions which will be there maybe for 6 months to 2 years time. And as the market settles, it's very important for us to roll back majority of these initiatives, stroke incentives, and ensure that our industry is Atmanirbhar. That's very important, and I think the government is taking those steps. If you see mobile phone, I'll again give that a particular example. We increased the tariffs over a period of time, creating a barrier for the foreign companies. We pushed them to set up manufacturing in India, and over a period of time, we have started reducing the tariffs. What does it entail? This classic example entails that government is giving protection only till the time the sector is getting developed in the country, post which they are providing a competitive environment for both foreign companies as well as Indian companies or foreign companies having manufacturing in India, so that our consumer gets the best benefit out of the penny which he is spending. I hope I tried and answer your question.
You did. You created a problem for Aditya, though, and I'm going to direct it to him. Uh, Two questions, Aditya. One was the USTR report that I was checking, and they talked about how there are these uh, barriers and subsidies that India provides and how they create a problem for other countries. So one is that two, US can come up and say, see, you are creating these things which we are not able to compete in certain categories, and this is the problem that you're creating. The second aspect of it is uh, when you follow down this path of interest guarantees or credit guarantees or interest rate equalization schemes, it's a beggar thy neighbor concept where you tend to keep producing it in order to compete with the Vietnam or compete with other countries. How do you stop all that milieu? How do you stop all that problem?
So it's not per se a problem. See, we have followed this protectionism policy for quite a while now, right? And interest rate subsidies or equalization or any other policy that the government of India implements, what the US is saying, US has a high protectionism in their own agriculture industry. It tends to give a very high kind of subsidies, and then they're asking the Indians to avoid those subsidies so that they can come and enter the market and use the market and you know earn from it. This thing goes both ways, I believe. If you are able to give subsidies on your own products, we will be allowed to do the same. See, what happened earlier was, see, we shifted directly from primary to service sector, right? And then we are coming back to manufacturing, though we had a manufacturing base, but then we are now focusing very hugely on manufacturing right now. So we need to understand the way the US developed and the way these subsidies and implementations or the programs were designed. It's not same for us. And that's why US cannot say that, going out and say that, you are giving a lot of taxes and tariffs. We provide cheap labor, and that is why US and all the world are are behind India. That we provide cheap labor. We compete with Vietnam on apparel sector. There's around 5 to 10% margin and very small margin. So we are as small as a 5% margin. We are fighting in that market. If we cannot protect our companies back home, that would be very destructive for the economy as a whole. So this thing needs to continue. And as sir said, this is a phased program. No, initially you give it, let the countries grow, let the companies grow. Once they grow and achieve the competitiveness that is there in the market, you remove it slowly and slowly, and let them go fight in the market. So that's nothing wrong about it, I believe. And we need to bear the cost, because then we are late in industrialization. We can understand that, right?
So, Saurabh, last question to you. Would this lead to more beggar thy neighbor policies from the rest of the world as well, in terms of trying to outcompete each other on subsidies uh, to dampen the impact of US tariffs, or trying to lower their currency to a point, depreciate it to a point where they can actually nullify that impact? Do you see that happening, or is that not a viable strategy for anybody?
So, Ishan, if you ask me, subsidy is not a solution. I started with the 50% tariffs. What type of subsidies are we talking about? I don't think so that we can grow the industry by subsidizing them to the extent of even 30-35%. I don't think so that can be done at all. I think there will be measures which will be taken in the long term, which will have an impact maybe 2 to 3 years down the line. Short term, we'll have to absorb the impact. There will be some impact on GDP, which we should be ready for until and unless there is some consensus which the Indian government is able to build with US. What is very important, and when I look at a lot of news channels, media reports, etc., what is very important for us to understand is, so far, uh, Mr. Trump is only talking about tariff on goods. So the impact on India, because our exports last year, I think somewhere around $84 billion, if I'm not wrong, with our trade surplus of close to $41 billion from US. I think the impact would have been lower as far as the goods is concerned. I don't think so far he has started talking about services. India has been exporting significant services. I think we have been talking about GCC as a story. With the
In
impact of tariffs on GCC, if at all any tariffs get imposed, I think that can be a larger blow for the Indians. And that impact is something which I am more worried of. I think the goods impact, somewhere I think the industry, the markets have already started absorbing. Also, at your channel, I want to specifically highlight, there's a lot of confusion as far as tariff on auto component is concerned. Sorry, I know that's not a question, but I would specifically highlight that one. On auto component, there has been a 25% tariff, which has been effective from 3rd May 2025. That tariff is under a separate section. The reciprocal tariff of 50%, which is 25 plus 25, is not applicable on auto component. So the impact, anyways, that 25% was a big enough impact for the US customer to look and try and find alternate supply chains outside India. So you can understand that the impact of 25% in itself has been great. So what the government should look at is not much of a short-term thing. I think the impact will be there in the market. I think we need to look this particular crisis to our advantage. And Indians are famous for one of the best crisis management. We have done it in COVID as well. So I think if that is being done, long term, I foresee a larger growth for the Indian economy.
Indians are famous for a long-term crisis management, and long-term is what we need to look at. Crisis management is our forte, is what Saurabh Agarwal says. Can India tide over the short-term crisis that the US has created until we reach a deal, if there is a deal at all in the offing? Or can it find alternative markets for it? Aditya Sharma says that we need to look at more GI tagging, creating branding, providing MSMEs with services, whereas Saurabh Agarwal says that there's a need to create a wider scope and look for the future rather than looking at the short-term impact. We need to absorb it. Experts say that about zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.3 percentage point of GDP would be impacted by Trump tariffs, which can go up to zero point 0.5 also in certain instances. But with that, India continues to remain the fastest growing economy. Thanks for coming on the show, both of you. We would love to have you back again. Thank you. And I'd like to thank our viewers for watching this show. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Ishan.